Hello and welcome to Tree Town. I am your host, Ryan McCooch, and I'm joined by Eric Rudland yet again. It is a special edition of the podcast, though, because we are, well, by the time this comes out, it'll be Thursday, and we're just days away from the season opener. As we record this, it's on Monday, and we're a little under a week out, but how are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, three's a charm, so I guess I don't know if anybody else has been on yet 3 times.
You're the first. We'll have to get you a jacket like they have on SNL.
Exactly. A little star on top of it or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, all is well. You know, we just kicked off our 4th week of training. You know, obviously still very early in the process, you know, waiting for players to still arrive. But we've been able to play, you know, one friendly match each week, you know, throughout the first 3 weeks of our preseason, which has been awesome, you know, just to get the group kind of moving in the right direction and, you know, introduce new players to the team each week, you know, in our friendly matches, you know, so hopefully that sets us up for, you know, a good weekend of actually preparing for a real match, you know, first league match this week.
So that ties into the first thing I did want to talk to you about, which is the preseason preparation and with the 3 friendlies, I believe it's been, that have been played, pretty low stress situations, being able to work in, whether it's a trialist or it's players coming in. How's that been for you as a coach? What are your main takeaways from those sorts of games?
Yeah, I mean, dating back to the first week we played, Carpathia, who actually put together, I thought, a really good side, you know, for our first match. They, you know, some seasoned veteran players, some guys that have some experience and know how to manage a game. And in that match, you know, we had, I think, 3 players that we had signed, you know, that played in the match. And then we had some trialists who had come in, some that we brought in after open tryouts back in February, and then a few players who were recommended through our network that were able to come in and join us for the first couple weeks of preseason. So, you know, it was a really good exercise in terms of seeing where those players, you know, were at compared to, you know, our group and some of the players we had committed, and then seeing how they responded in a match environment instead of just an open tryout or a training session.
Right.
So that was encouraging. It was a good first step, I think, competitively and for those players. And then week 2, we played against Northwood University, kind of an exact opposite type of opponent in terms of Carpathia, who maybe weren't the fittest, but seasoned players who can manage a game. You know, Northwood, young college players who are in the midst of their spring season. They were fit. You know, they had a number of substitutions, so they kept the tempo pretty high for us. And again, we had a few more of our guys in for that match in week 2. You know, it was definitely encouraging. Good result. Scored some good goals. Defensively weren't real secure. You know, so that was one takeaway we took from that. Is obviously we have to continue to hammer that side of the ball, and part of it was personnel, and part of it was still trying to shape our identity when we don't have possession. And then this past week, we played against the Jags, their new men's team, and that'll play in the UPSL. And again, some great takeaways, you know, some moments that I thought were fantastic, and then other moments where we've got to get better, and, you know, we have to make progress in preparation for our first match. So, you know, it's been good to get the games in. Training has been sharp. Guys I think are hungry to get better. It's been competitive. And I think we'll see, obviously, as we get more college players in over this week and next week, the competitive, you know, edge in training should increase, because now there's going to be competition for spots in the team, you know. And this weekend when we pick our first 18, you know, that message kind of transcends through the group that I got to win a spot, you know. So, you know, and that's always a fun process to go through.
Now, having been able to attend all 3 friendlies, it was really cool to see whether it's the players who were there from game 1 to game 3, whether you start to see them catch the system and start learning more and more. And as you see more guys embed themselves, it's fun to see all the improvements. And that leads me to ask you about the training methods that you go through. How different is it leading into game week from maybe that first week of training?
You know, I would say that, you know, when we look at like the first block of our season, you know, you kind of look at training in 2 different ways. There's different blocks of like a microcycle that we want to get in the beginning, maybe the middle, and maybe the end of the season, like, because that's how you're going to build the team to try to fine tune. But then there's just the weekly rhythm of training that stays somewhat consistent throughout the year, in terms of like today, Monday, the guys came in after 2 days off. So it was a heavy session physically, but we also want to paint pictures based on what we saw in our match last Thursday that can help us make progress as a group. As we get later into the week, we can start to talk about preparing to play against the opponent, on Saturday. So in preseason for our matches, we didn't prepare for the opponent at all. It was just about us and trying to make progress as a group. So this week things will change a little bit where, we're actually taking, the last 2 days of our week to look forward at the opponent, to talk about how, we want to react with and without the ball, what their team shape looks like, what their tendencies are, and things like that. So, it's kind of funny. Like we have, we've covered things and we're going to have to just continue to revisit them because you have new players that come in.
Right.
We're like, hey, coach, we haven't talked about that. Yeah. Well, yeah, we actually did 3 weeks ago. You were just still taking final exams or whatever you had going on.
That is really funny and ties into what I want to ask you about collegiate players, where you have guys who may still be coming in, taking finals. I'm still taking finals, so I understand the stress. What is the process that you generally go through in terms of embedding a player who might be, say you've already been training, 2-3 weeks, and a new player comes in that you figure to be a key component of the side this season? How do you go about embedding them into the system?
It's somewhat situational. If we have a returning player that, was fantastic for us last year, they're coming off of a good spring season, they're healthy, they come into the team, there's a good chance that they can step in and, break into the group right away, where maybe you bring in a player in who we haven't worked with before, who we've heard good things about, who even if they've had a good spring season, we're still going to want to get the player in probably and give them a couple sessions to try to integrate them. Just, I think one component obviously is we want to gain a little bit more insight on the player, but also we want that player to feel comfortable and confident going into their first performance, because at the end of the day, we're all judged based on our performance, whether you're, players, coaches, club, etc. So, we want that player to feel like they can compete and perform at the highest level possible. So, at the pro level, maybe that takes 2-3 weeks to bleed a player in. At our level, it might be 2-3 days to bleed the player in.
Things are a bit faster.
Yeah, it's an expedited process, as we like to say. And then also there's outlying variables. For new guys coming in, maybe it's a positional need. We don't have a player. So that player maybe steps in right away, or we've had a couple of guys get injured during preseason, so maybe that opens up a door for a new player that comes into the group. Maybe the opponent we're playing against is going to call for, a different player profile in a certain position. So we're looking at all those things along with, returning guys versus new guys as well.
How much experimentation do you do in those early training sessions where you look at a player and say, yeah, he may be a midfielder, but he looks good at right back, for example? Does that happen a lot, or do you try to keep that to a minimum?
Yeah, again, it's situational. I think we try to plan out a lot of those things before players get in. Like when we build the roster, obviously, bringing in some versatile players is important, because if a player is versatile, they can, if they're in an 18 or in an 11, maybe you have some tactical flexibility in the match where you could, change shapes or match the opponent's shape or whatever the case is. So, we try to do our homework on that, to understand. We have a player who's getting in from Canada today, actually, who we know can play in the midfield. He could also play in the back line, so we kind of know that coming in. Now it's just about where does he fit into our group. Okay. So I wouldn't, there's some maybe experimental component, but it's also, what works for the player and what works for us, but we know that he might be able to fill one of two positions in the group. Okay. So, percentage-wise or number of players, I mean, maybe have done that so far with 2 guys that have come in, and we probably have 2 or 3 more that will trickle in that we'll have to figure that out.
Okay. So I do want to gear towards the games to come, which immediately is the Michigan Stars, which is the season opener. Everyone's really excited about that. Is preparation different for you for a season opener as it may be for a different game, or do you try and keep it business as usual?
I'd say a game's a game. I would say the one thing, we're super fortunate this week where, we're prepared for one game on the weekend. There's rhythms in the season where you're preparing for two games on a weekend. So we can really kind of put all of our focus into the match. And I wouldn't say that it's different in terms of our preparation, but obviously I think the mindset of the group and the excitement, to kick off the season and for guys some players playing their first match for the club and other guys to play in their, second, third, fourth season with the club. That's something that's hard to recreate, I think, later in the season, right? There's only one first game to start the year off. But, obviously a midseason game or an end of the season game, all have a little bit of a different feel based on league standings or home versus away or the opponent. So I wouldn't say the preparation's any different, but obviously the feel of the match has its own unique identity.
Do you look for different positives in performances from point A to point B in a season? Like, is something, obviously you want to get the win in every game, but is there something that you may see as positive at the start of the season and then something different in the middle of the season from the same player?
I would say so. Obviously we always want to make progress and continue to evolve and get better as a group. And I'd say for individual players, they should have the same ambition. So we've even seen it in preseason matches so far, talking to guys individually after matches. Hey, this wasn't good enough, or we'd like you to think about this, or whether it's a spacing issue or a technical issue. So the next time we go out on the field, whether it's in training or a match, we want to see that player enhance that component of their game. Otherwise, what are we doing here if we're not getting better, right? So, there's benchmarks throughout the season, performance-based, obviously points, that we obviously want to continue to see us take steps forward. And if you can do that, such a short, condensed season, I think the group then is positioned, for a run at the end of the season. But if you're not getting points and you're not making that progress early on with how short the season is, it's like before you know it, you've played 7 out of 14 games or 8 out of 14 games or whatever it is. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
Let's gear towards the game itself, where you were able to see Michigan Stars recently, correct? Mm-hmm. What did you take anything away from that you can share, or what do you look for when you look at an opposition?
It's I always enjoy, obviously, if I can go watch a match live. So I was fortunate to be able to do that. It's you can take in a lot more information than just watching a game on camera or online or whatever it is. We got a clear picture, for their shape, both defending and attacking. How they look to play out of the back. We got a good gauge on individual player profiles and what type of personalities they have. Dominant foots, tendencies, got a good grasp of all that stuff. Now the unknown is, hey, do they have new players arriving this week that they're going to use on the weekend? Or, hey, they got a positive result last night. Are they going to keep the team the same? These are things that in our league, you just don't know. Yeah. So I think what, we tend to do, obviously, when we scout an opponent is we look at, overall kind of structural things, how do they defend in these areas of the fields? How do they attack in these areas of the fields? With these players, what type of versatility do they have? And I think what you find in our league is that most teams have a blueprint of how they play, and then they're going to have interchanging pieces that may be a little bit different, individual players, that is. Mm-hmm. And maybe a team is not having success and they change their system mid-season, or maybe a team plays a little bit different, home versus away. So we look for those things. But, I'd say that we have a decent understanding of the opponent on the weekend. On the game, you got to be prepared for anything, though. You never know. So and that's why we show up and play.
Absolutely. Is it a bit different for you starting at Michigan Stars, where you've been to Milwaukee the past 2 seasons?
Is that
something you think about?
No, every I think like maybe early on at coaching, you kind of get like, oh, okay, so this worked last year, so let's do it again, right? But every season has its its own season, right? So there's going to be things that we learned from this year that are different than from last year. Maybe worked last year, doesn't work this year. I mean, so I think for us, with the weather outside right now, to be playing indoors will be fantastic on Saturday.
That was my next question for you.
So in Milwaukee, it could be snowing, or who knows what's going on out there. So that's an advantage. It's at Ultimate, it's a big field, 70 by 120 or 75 by 120. So there should be a lot of spaces and pockets to find to play. So for us, I mean, not really dwelling on the positive season openers in Milwaukee the past couple of years. Just about obviously getting things right for 2019.
You bring up an interesting point, which is that you'll be playing indoors. Is now Wixom, which is where the friendlies have all been indoors, obviously, as well. Is the indoor versus outdoor, is that something you think about very heavily in terms of preparation for the game? Well,
we try to get ready to play with the wind at our back in one half and the wind in our face in the other half. No, I'm just joking. There are some things that are different. Like when the ball goes out of bounds, you can restart play very quickly.
Yeah.
So we talk about that. Restarts are going to come fast, which hopefully we can take advantage of that. The second piece is if the ball hits the roof or the ceiling, how is play restarted? Every referee and indoor facility has a different way of doing that. So we have to make sure that our guys are on the same page, the referee, the opponent, we have that piece handled. But aside from that, I mean, it's, a game's a game. It looks a little bit different because you're inside, obviously. But I think that, it shouldn't be an issue in terms of preparation or, our guys' mentality or anything like that. It's just got to get ready to play.
Something else that is interesting is that you mentioned settling into patterns and that sort of thing throughout the season. There is a bit of a wrench in the pattern of this first week, which is the Open Cup game on Wednesday. How do you go about preparing your team for that, where you have a stretch of 3 games within an 8-day span?
Yeah, I mean, it's early, right? So, I think we wanted to think about a player rotation. It's kind of like the way in a perfect world we'd be able to handle 3 games in that stretch. A lot of it's just based on player availability, though, and depth that we do or don't have, coming up. So, we're still trying to get a few guys cleared and registered through our league and through U.S. Soccer. So that will be a variable that we have to accommodate as well. So honestly, this week's just about bleeding some new players into the team and getting prepared for the weekend. And then we've obviously carved out next week, Monday and Tuesday, to get prepared for the Open Cup match. So, we've thought about it in regards to, we have to plan out our schedule, but actual player availability of who we think we have a good handle on that. Who will be healthy after the weekend? Who's cleared through U.S. Soccer? Who's cleared through our league? We still have to get through those things. So, we've been trying to, we try to scout all of our opponents. So, we've got information on like the first 3 or first 4 opponents we play. So league opponents as well as Open Cup. So we're starting to put some data together on the upcoming matches. So we understand the opponent and we have some information to take to the training pitch and then share with our players. So, I mean, we're looking forward to the weekend, and then obviously we can flip the page and get ready for next Wednesday.
Now, in terms of preparation, you'll see Stars twice, obviously. You'll see Kalamazoo twice. You'll only see Lansing once. It's a one-off. Does preparation for those sorts of one-off games differ, or does it stay more or less the same?
Yeah, I would say when you're playing a team twice, obviously you're looking at in the first match, are we home or away, right? And so, there's going to be a different feel to the match there. And then, if you play an opponent the second time, I don't think it necessarily changes how you play the first match, but you're definitely going to reflect upon that first match. Mm-hmm. Maybe that gives you, further intel going into the second match, or, maybe gives your players some predispositions based on the opponent, their personnel, right, that they're going to take into the second match. So when it's a one-off game, is it home or away? So obviously we're going away. We have to deal with their field, their conditions, and be prepared for all of those things. But hey, are we going to save a guy for the second time we play him, or are we going to try to play different home versus away? It's like, no, I mean, we got to get after it. It's the only match, so. they're not coming to Ann Arbor anytime soon, and we got to find a way to make a competitive game, So, but it's definitely different than, playing a team twice.
It feels like, I'm a big basketball guy, conference season of basketball. The Big Ten, you see teams beat each other up because you see them so many times. That it feels sort of almost the same with that within the Great Lakes, where you have so many good teams where you can see them, twice a season. You kind of get their system down pat.
Yep, exactly. No, I think it's a good analogy.
Now, Kalamazoo is the home opener. Does the home opener bring about the same excitement for you as the season opener, or is it by then are you just already settled into the season?
I think so. I mean, we're settled into the season. I think we're by that point we'll have played 2 competitive games. But I think for the players, for the community, for the club, it's definitely an important moment, to kick off the season. A new venue at Concordia, obviously. So I think it's a special day. You can't discount that at all. The season opener is going to be great. And then obviously the home opener, I think, has, like I mentioned earlier, I think every match has its own identity and its own feel to it. And I think that's definitely one that does, whether it's 2019 or 2015 or 2022, the home opener is going to be a special day.
Right. So in terms, I do want to talk a bit about the travel as well, where I believe we've touched on it before in a previous podcast, but the NPSL, the Great Lakes as a whole, you are seeing more condensed travel, where I think FC Indiana is probably the farthest away trip. Michigan Stars is down the road in Pontiac, about hour and a half away. Is that shorter travel something that you and the players appreciate?
I think so. I mean, you look at, the wear and tear, and we talk a lot about recovery and sleep that the guys are getting. So I think the less travel is easier on guys' bodies, especially when you have to maybe play 2 games in a weekend or 3 games in a week. If we have an away game on a Friday and an away game on a Sunday, you're talking about a 4-hour trip compared to a 1-hour trip. Like that's a big difference. That's 6 hours less traveling, and it takes a toll on the body when you start to accumulate that travel time throughout the course of a season. So, it's not something that we necessarily talk about, like, hey, it's going to be way better this year because we have less travel, but it's definitely something that I think the players, notice in their bodies and their mood and how much energy they have, and especially their recovery time after playing a match. I think it's beneficial.
So gearing back towards the season opener, which is, as I mentioned, it'll be only days away once this comes out. What exactly can fans look forward to from this season? More specifically, the season opener.
I mean, what we've been excited about as a club and as a staff, to have some returning guys in the mix has been fantastic.
I think you've seen that already with player announcements. People are excited about the returnees. Yeah,
and then it's a bit unique too, because oftentimes you're talking about returning players, who are coming back. They were with us last summer. They're coming back again, but it's pretty unique. We've got a handful of guys, who were with us back in 2017, were a big part of our success, weren't with us last summer and are back this summer. Like that has a unique feel to it, because I think there's some loyalty, from us to them and them to us, and I think there's some eagerness for them to perform and have success. So I think that'll be a cool feature in our first match this weekend, and hopefully, obviously, throughout the course of the season. And then, when you start talking about new players, I think, they're unknown commodities at this point, right? And I think there's some excitement, around the supporters group and the community of, who's the next guy, right? That could be a guy who moves on to the next level, or, maybe who's the next local player that's going to come through the system that, we can start tracking over the next couple of years. So hopefully we have a few of those players in the side that, people really enjoy watching, and their talents and their passion resonate throughout the community, because, I think that's something unique that our club has done at this level the past couple seasons, is bring in players of those qualities.
The local flair that you touched upon, is that something that you're conscious about keeping within the team, or do you think that just happens naturally by way of being an NPSL side?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think, now we've been around long enough, so players in the area at age 14,
Yeah.
15, 16, they came to a game as a youth player, they've stayed connected, or, there's an affinity with the club that, you probably didn't have in 2015, 16, 17, So I think that's a cool thing. And then obviously it's important for us, from a resource standpoint. It's not like we can, house 20 some guys for the summer, so we need local players. We need that talent pool. And again, and then, the third part is obviously, I think, our fans want to see local players in the team. They, whether it's a kid from University of Michigan that they can go watch play in the fall and then watch play here in the summer, I think those connections are cool, and we obviously want to nurture those and, make sure that we're finding the best local guys to be a part of our club.
Now, something else I did want to talk about, which is on the horizon, which is also the Michigan Milk Cup, where I believe Michigan Stars played that game that you saw. That was against Livonia. The opponent is confirmed. It's BIHGR. And then if you win that game, you'll take on the winner of Flint City Bucks and Michigan Stars. The Michigan Milk Cup, I know for me and I know for other fans, is something that's exciting in terms of you get to play all teams in Michigan, and it's something sort of unique. Is that a similar feeling for you and the staff, or is that still far enough out of reach where you haven't given it a ton of pressing thought?
We haven't talked about it a ton. I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about the opponent of who it is now that it's been decided. Mm-hmm. We know the coach there, so I think we might be able to shape some assumptions, about how they're going to play and their system and style. But at the end of the day, I mean, as that match approaches, obviously we got to get some more detailed information. Either myself or one of our coaches or our director of scouting will have to get out and see him play, so we can put that stuff together. But generally speaking, about the Milk Cup, I think it's been cool to see that competition evolve. When you think back to its first season in 2017, it was essentially a competition just for teams in the NPSL. Mm-hmm. So there weren't additional games or teams from outside of our league that we had an opportunity to be paired against. Last year, was kind of the first evolution to incorporate teams from different leagues, and then obviously the tournament has refined its process this year, and obviously is going to still incorporate teams from outside different leagues, just not the one-off home and away competition. It's just going to be one-off games. So I think it's a cool competition. It's great for our club to be a part of. So when we look at our player rotation for that game, the question is it a game where maybe some guys can break in and get a feature that maybe haven't played as much for the club, or is it a game that, based on our schedule and amount of matches in that period of time, do we play, some main guys, and, we need to do that, whether it be because of the opponent or we need the result or, where we are in our season, obviously. So, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to the, which is still, a little over a month or so away.
Yeah. Now, veering back again towards the NPSL, some newer fans who may have only started supporting the club recently may be excited to see Michigan Stars because they weren't in the league last year, but they have been around since they only took a year-long hiatus. But they have a new coach, they have a slightly new setup, and for you who you've coached against them with AFC and Arbor, can you take anything away from those older results back in 2016 and 2017, or do you kind of have to just throw that away because it's a newer setup?
I think we have to just kind of look at them for who they are right now. I think I think the maybe similarities to years past are more kind of on the organizational side. The owner and whatever the business side of the club, where I think the soccer side, every year they've been in the league, they've had a different coach, dating back to when I used to play with them when I was in Lansing. They haven't had much consistency, from a leadership standpoint on the soccer side, which means, you bring in a new coach. Obviously that coach is going to bring in some of their own players. They're going to have their own system, their own style, their own identity that they're going to foster in the group. So I wouldn't say that we can look back and, really use any of that insider information, but we can see what we can see now, and we know some of the players that are there who we've seen play before, so I think we can take some information about individual players because a lot of them have not changed drastically, so how they fit into the system and how they're used. We're always looking for any and all information we can to obviously get prepared for a match. So I think we can use that type of insights pretty valuable.
Last question for you. For me in particular, I've really enjoyed being able to come out and see the team, whether it's through training or whether it's through the friendlies, come out and improve, and you can see the noticeable improvements within the players. Have there been any highlights for you throughout the preseason?
Highlights for me? Yeah, I mean, for me, point to a couple things. One, we have had a couple players come in that, we're really excited about. So I think those are always highlights when, you spend a lot of time watching players, recruiting players and scouting players, and you get a couple guys in, you're like, okay, good. This player's exactly what we thought we were going to get. So that's positive. I think the mentality of the group has been really positive. Sometimes, in preseason, when you're not really preparing for a real game, it's just a preseason friendly. Sometimes there's a temptation in players to maybe, go at half speed or take a day off or maybe not come in with as sharp of a mentality. And we don't have a ton of players in right now who are really competing for spots in the team. It's, we're playing 16 guys in training or 18 guys in training. It doesn't have that type of feel where there's 20 plus players and everybody's breathing down everybody's neck to win a spot. So that's been positive, is just to see the guys get after it. And then third is we've seen a lot of progress physically with the group, just in terms of fitness. And, we had a number of players come in, who weren't in a competitive environment for a month or so, until they got to us or they were training on their own, and there's always a different feel to training on your own and being with the team.
Right.
So I think those three things have been definitely noteworthy and encouraging, and obviously keeps us grinding day to day to press forward.
All right. Eric, thank you again for coming on. We appreciate it. And thank you all for watching or listening. You can follow us on Twitter at AFCN Arbor, and you can stay tuned to afcnarbor.com for any of the latest news. Until next time, I'm Ryan McCooch. Take care.